Good evening, everyone. My name is Ankesh. On behalf of Cambridge University Press, I welcome you all to today's session. Before we begin, few instructions. Your microphones are muted and your video modes are turned off. In case you want to ask something, you can post your questions on the chat, and we'll pick it up during the Q&A session that we are parked towards the end. In case you're facing any audio issues, I would request you to please check your device. And if this problem is still persistent, kindly check the settings on the within the app itself. There is an audio setting within the app, so you can try that also. The recording of this session would be available post the webinar is over. You'll get a feedback link on your mail ID and you can access the recording of the webinar. So please don't worry about it. So without much of a delay, let me take the privilege to introduce the trainer for today, Dr. Ghazala Siddiqui. She has done her PhD in education and has contributed to material development, content writing, and reviewing at various organizations like NCRT, Cambridge University Press, SCRT, and Jamia Millia Islamia University. She is currently teaching English at secondary level at Jamia Millia Islamia New Delhi. She has worked as a freelancer seller examiner for British Council and is currently working as an ELT expert in Access Micro Scholarship Teaching Program American Center. She also works as a teacher and a program coordinator for international projects by World Learning and has successfully conducted training sessions for Madrasa background teachers pan-India. She has coordinated international projects with teachers from Afghanistan in collaboration with the expert faculty from World Learning. She has taught ESL at primary, secondary, and university level and has led many professional development and training programs for teachers in government schools, public schools, and colleges. Her papers and articles have been published in national and international journals. She has also authored postbook for Cambridge University Press. With that, I welcome Dr. Ghazala ma'am to start the presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello, friends. I welcome you all to this session on gamesome grammar. There are multiple ways of looking at things. If you were to look at the same place and see different things, you need to look at the same place from different perspectives. And that is exactly how we look at the landscape of teaching and learning. When we look at the elements of language like grammar, vocabulary, syntax, phrases, idioms, all these contribute in enriching the landscape of language learning. So I would like to share with you a very interesting title of a book that I came across. And that book, the title of that book had a syntactic ambiguity, a fallacy arising out of erroneous grammatical construction. So it was like this. At the back cover of the book, there was this very interesting anecdote. A panda walks into a cafe. He orders a sandwich, sits down, eats the sandwich, and then gets up, takes out a gun from his pocket, fires 2 shots in the air, and then prepares to leave. A very bewildered waiter, he comes to him and he asks him, "Why did you do that?" And the panda takes out a very badly punctuated wildlife manual from his pocket and he hands it over to the waiter and he says, "Here, I am Panda. Please have a look at this." And sure enough, the waiter skims and scans through the pages till he comes to the definition of panda. And it said, "Panda, a large black and white bear-like mammal native to China, eats, shoots, and leaves." So the idea was to bring your notice to the fact that there are so many different ways of looking at language and see what punctuation and such grammatical errors do to a language. That is why grammar really matters. Now, in this session, I will try to make it as interactive as possible because, of course, it is based on games, how we can make grammar more communicative. So I expect all of you to be very, very active throughout the session because there'll be lots of activities and lots of responses from all of you. Okay, so let me introduce the modules to you. The outline of the session is like this. I'll be talking about what is grammar, what are the approaches to teaching grammar, how can grammar be made grammar be taught communicatively? What are some of the strategies that we can use in teaching grammar, and how grammar can be made gamesome? Now, grammar, if you look at it, it's a very abstract aspect of the whole landscape of learning. And when people look upon grammar, sometimes, it intimidates them too. So it's very important that we understand the nuances of grammar and use it in the classroom to enrich that landscape. All right. So let me begin with a little introduction to a grammar family. I would want to introduce all of you to this lovely grammar family. This grammar family lives in a town called Lingwapur. There's a person by the name of Mr. Noun, and he has a wife by the name of Mrs. Verb. Mr. Noun and Mrs. Verb, they are a very happy couple. Now, Mr. Noun and Mrs. Verb, they have 3 children. The eldest is the son, and he's called Pronoun. Pronoun makes sure that whenever any family member is not present, he comes and takes their place. He's a very helpful fellow that way. They have 2 daughters. One is adverb, the other is adjective. Both adverb and adjective are temperamentally very, very different. While adjective is quite loud in the sense that she's always very opinionated, she comes and tells everyone how they look. She comes and talks about their weaknesses, their strengths. She points that out to them. Like only yesterday, when she went out with her father for a walk, and she said, "Daddy, you look so smart." Now, adverb is different. Temperamentally, she is different. She assists and helps everybody in the house. Whatever actions they do, she just goes and modifies them. For instance, her mother was, writing a letter yesterday, and adverb went up to her and she said, "Mama, please make sure that you write the letter neatly." All right. So that's about the lovely family. And they have 2 domestic aids. One is conjunction. Conjunction makes sure that everybody is well connected in the house, especially when they're sitting at the dining table to have their meals. He makes sure that adverb and pronoun are sitting together and adjective sits in between adverb and pronoun. Okay, so he makes sure that they are well connected. And there is another domestic help, and he is called preposition. Preposition makes sure that everything is in order and things are kept at the right place. For instance, yesterday, there was this day when the remote control of the TV was lying on the floor, so he picked it up and he kept it on the rack. So he ensures that their place in the house. So that is the lovely grammar family. And let me also tell you, they also have a neighbor who's kind of quite cozy, whenever there's any kind of a celebration in the house, he's the first one to come running and share his surprises with them. Or if they buy anything new, he comes and congratulates them. So that is how he is. In fact, they started calling him Mr. Hey, because he always begins his exclamations with a word like hey. So that is the lovely grammar family I was telling you about. So let me ask you some questions now. It's an activity that is based on this grammar story. Taking cues from the words in bold. Can you guess who they are? I would want you to put your answers in the chat box. The first one, let me put the kettle on the stove. All right. So in the chat box, you can just type in your answers and just write right there in the chat box who said this. I mean, who did this? Let me put the kettle on the stove. Dear family, I have bought a new car. Okay, so the bold words are family and car. So who could have said that? Put that answer in the chat box. Let me see your chat box. Okay, the third one. Hello, what an amazing car. Congratulations. Who do you think could have said that? I am writing a letter. Please write it neatly and legibly. So you need to write your answers, taking cues from the words that are in bold. Dad, you look smart in your new jacket. Who could have said that? Mr. Noun and Mrs. Verb, would you like to have tea or coffee? Who could have said that? So Please put in your answers in the chat box and I'll have a look at them. Okay. Now, coming back to what grammar is. Okay. So, grammar is a set of rules or principles for combining words to express meaning. Now, if you look at this slide, you see a monster sitting there. All right. So that is how many a times teachers and even students, they tend to look upon grammar as something that is very, very intimidating. Okay. So I've named it as a grammar monster. So grammar can be so intimidating, but if it is understood well and if it is practiced well, then I don't think we need to take it as a monster. All right. If we just understand the nuances of grammar rules, and the approach that we use to understand grammar and the approach that we use to teach grammar, it would not seem so intimidating as it seems to most of us. Okay, now let's talk about the reasons for teaching grammar. Why is it that we need to teach grammar? Now, grammar helps in achieving creativity. Can you imagine? I mean, these lines of beautiful poetry, uh, the lines of a beautiful poetry that comes to my mind. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Can you imagine these beautiful lines penned by Robert Frost? If teachers did not have the ability to understand these lines and appreciate them, they would have gone waste. And Robert Frost, for that matter, he used all the way he has expressed himself in these beautiful poetic lines. So that lends that beautiful, that sense of creativity to language. So language helps in achieving linguistic creativity. I want you to do a little task here. I want you to think of a letter. It could be the the first letter of your name. Okay, jot it down somewhere. Think of a noun, that letter. Think of a verb, an adjective, a place, a fruit or a vegetable using that letter. All right, write that down somewhere. And now what you have to do is you have to compose a meaningful sentence using all these words in one single sentence. Let's see how very creative you can be. All right. So I am looking forward to your responses in the chat box. Okay. I don't see any response here. I would really request you to put your responses in the chat box here. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Grammar enables us to generate new sentences. Now, if we look at vocabulary, which I think all teachers insist on in the classrooms for to all the students, that they must create a vocabulary bank and they must work to enhance their vocabulary skills. But vocabulary in themselves are not enough. You need grammar to give a skeletal framework to your language. It's very important that we focus on grammar because it helps us in generating new sentences. Now, this can also be termed as a sentence machine argument. No matter how rich the vocabulary is, without grammar, it becomes static. So it's really important that we teach grammar for this reason. And also, when we are teaching grammar, we must ensure as teachers that we provide a context to the students so that they can be taken from the level of form to meaning. That's really, really important, because without a context, it will just be like, mugging up and making poly parrots out of them, and that would not be helpful. So providing a context to teach anything, and specifically in this case grammar, that's really, really important, because that will help in a better understanding of concepts, and they would be able to generate new sentences. Okay. Grammar allows for fine tuning of meaning. Now that's an extension of the first, what I spoke about a little while ago. It's an extension of the same. It is responsible for fine tuning of meaning, for providing a meaning to the form that we teach our students. So grammar will give, grammar redefines a word, redefines it in such a way that it becomes meaningful and people are able to understand. Okay, now have a look at these sentences. Last Monday night, I was boring in my house. Grammatically, it is incorrect. Last Monday night, I was getting bored in my house, so I called my friends. All right, so that is how grammar allows for fine-tuning of meaning. So that's the reason why grammar is so significant, and we need to teach our students grammar so that they can form meaningful sentences and they can understand meaningful sentences. Then, grammar avoids fossilization effect. Now, what exactly is a fossilization effect? Fossilization refers to the process in which incorrect language becomes a habit and cannot easily be erased. I have come across a lot of people when they are introducing themselves, they use phrases like myself so and so, all right, which is grammatically not correct. I am so and so, or my name is so and so. Then there are errors that many students and many people make. It's where genders are concerned. There are people who might say, my father went to her sister's house and gave her a gift. My father went to her sister's house. Now, this is a kind of an error which is termed as a fossilized error because it becomes a kind of a habit, and it's very difficult to get rid of errors like these. So grammar avoids these kind of fossilization errors. Uh, in the classroom, errors generally take time to correct, but a fossilized error sometimes never ever be corrected unless teachers ensure that there's a lot of drilling and a lot of practice that goes into it. And also, one suggestion could be that if there are students who make these kind of errors, teacher could record the errors and probably play it for them and correct it so that they have an idea that they are making an error, and that internalization of that error making becomes strong and they rectify it. And there is another attitude which we term as pick it up as you go along attitude. Many people think that, especially when we talk about the theory of, let's say, Noam Chomsky, who propounded the theory of universal grammar, who said that children are born with a language acquisition device and it comes very naturally to them. But let us not forget that this works well with where L1 is concerned. People pick it up naturally. But when we learn a language, a second language, then we need to care of this. I mean, we cannot apply the same approach to teaching a second language. The pick up as you go along approach is that, like, students just pick up a language as they go on their saga of language learning. But if you notice the shape of a plateau, there will be an upward trend, and after that comes a stage when it would become stagnant. There would be no upward trend. So that is where this fossilization effect and this kind of a stagnation effect that can prove to be detrimental. So grammar can avoid that this kind of an error. Okay, grammar has a delayed impact for English for foreign language learners, and sometimes it comes handy much later in life. So it has been observed that there was a researcher by the name of Richard Schmidt who kept a diary of his experiences learning Portuguese in Brazil. And initially, he had enrolled in a formal language class where there was a heavy emphasis on grammar. So when he subsequently left these classes to travel to Brazil, his Portuguese made good progress. And he realized that he had actually picked them up in the grammar classes. So sometimes what happens is when a teacher is teaching in the classroom, a lot of what is taught might not go into the conscious mind of the learner. It might just fall into the subconscious mind. And there might come a time in his life when he comes across a situation or he comes across an experience where whatever was there, whatever had been lying dormant in his subconscious mind, that again resurfaces. So that's the delayed impact that grammar sometimes makes. So it's a positive attribute of grammar. So that is why grammar, and it's good for students, for students who are learning a foreign language, because it's proved to be quite helpful, and people have experienced it. Okay, then grammar can be learned through a structured system of transmission in institutionalized setups. Now, a system of transmission is based on rules. All right, rules which are very kind of very institutionalized kind of learning. And institutionalized kind of learning is a learning where normally you have a very huge crowd of students in the institution, and there is a strict adherence to rules. So students might not be intrinsically motivated, so it is very important for them to understand language with the help of grammar, relying on rules because they are so accustomed to it. So this kind of a structured system at times works well because people are used to adhering to rules, and it can be taught in method. It has very methodical kind of steps. So grammar can be taught in this way too, and it has proved to be quite helpful to many. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Grammar helps in interpretations of ideas and expressions. So here I am going to show you, these are some headlines from a the first sample is done for you. It says, include your children when baking cookies. Now this is a newspaper headline, include your children when baking cookies. As I was telling you about different perspectives, looking at language from different perspectives, this sentence too can have multiple meanings. It depends on how you interpret it. So include your children when baking cookies. It might be, maybe children, maybe in a cannibal land where children, where people include humans in the process of cooking, but let's not think about it. But what the newspaper headline intends to say is that children need to be involved in the process of baking cookies so that they learn a new art, they learn a new skill. Okay, so that is what I want you to take a look at. The second one, Iraqi head seeks arms. So I would want you to write one keyword that is related to your interpretation of this headline in the chat box. Please do that. I request you to write that down in the chat box. That one keyword, like the word that I have written for the first sentence, the first headline. So in the same way, I request you to write a keyword. What's this? How you interpret it as. Iraqi head seeks arms. Okay, let's look at the, why is it I cannot see the chats? Okay, let's look at the third one. Squad helps dog bite victim. Squad helps dog bite victim. How would you interpret it as? The fourth one, hybrid man-eating pythons. Florida is on alert. What is your interpretation of this headline? A lot depends on how we pronounce words. A lot depends on the kind of intonation or the voice modulation we use when we say these sentences, these headlines. All right. So Iraqi head seeks arms. Look at the third one. Squad helps dog bite victim. Squad helps dog bite victim. A pause makes a difference here. Hybrid man eating pythons. Florida is on alert. Hybrid man eating pythons. Oh my God, Florida should be on alert. Or is it hybrid man eating pythons? Florida is on alert. So pauses, punctuations, all these are subtle nuances of grammar learning and be taken care of. So please put your answers in the chat box, and I will move on to the next slide. Okay. Okay. Language also, when we take care of grammar, it also helps us in enhancing our lateral thinking skills. For instance, there are three examples here. Let me ask you, people buy me to eat, but never eat me. What do you think it could be? People buy me to eat, but never eat me. I'm sorry, I cannot have access to the chat box and I cannot see what is being texted here. The more you take, the more you leave behind. What do you think this is? The third one, why is the letter T like an island? Any guesses? Okay, since I cannot see your chat, so I will talk about the first one and probably discuss the answer. People buy me to eat, but never eat me. What do you think it could be? It could be a plate. The more you take, the more you leave behind. I'll give you a hint here. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives behind, and departing, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. So what do you think the answer could be? Yes, footprints. Okay, the third letter T like an island because it's right there in the middle of water. Okay, so if we are well versed with the nuances of grammar, then lateral thinking skills will definitely be sharp. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, I am totally in love with this poster. A poster of punctuations. As you can see, there is that cute little comma which says, I think we should take a break just for a second. I think we should take a break just for a second. And what does the full stop say? The full stop says, I think we should stop altogether. And then the exclamation comes running and it says, I agree, I agree. And what does the question mark say? The question mark says, what are you guys talking about? Okay, so these beautiful punctuations come really handy and they are instrumental in making our landscape of grammar really rich, and we need to take care of that. Let's move on to a little activity that I have used. It's based on a narrative, and I would love to share this with you because my students did it, and it was really beautiful the way they expressed themselves using these. Let me share this activity with you. It's an activity where you can focus on grammar, and the activity uses narratives to define certain concepts of grammar. So I'll share that with you. It's the story of a boy with a blue heart. The boy with the blue heart shifted to a new city. And when he shifted to a new city, of course, he needed friends. So the boy with the blue heart saw that there were many children playing in the park. So he went across to them and he said, can I be your friend? First, he went to a boy who was wearing a cap with the letter E written on it. So he said, can I be your friend? And the boy with the letter E said, oh, well, yes, but there are some conditions. And he asked, the boy with the blue heart asked him, what are the conditions? He said, well, you can be my friend if you are exciting, if you are, can I have more adjectives with E? Energetic. If you are more adjectives with E, enthusiastic. So the boy with the blue heart thought, why is he putting so many conditions? He said, but why do I need to do that? Can't you just accept me as I am? Anyway, he said, no, then we cannot be your friend. So he went to the other fellow who had the letter C written on his cap and he asked him the same question. Can I be your friend? So the boy with the letter C said, yes, you can be my friend if you are charming. More adjectives with C, more adjectives, you can keep texting them. If you are cute, if you are cheerful. I wish I could have seen the adjectives that you are texting. All right, so more adjectives with the letter C. And again, why ask them? Why do I need to? The boy with the blue heart said, why do I need to do that? Said, well, then we will not be friends with you. So likewise, he went to O, who put conditions on him that you need to be optimistic, you need to be opportunistic. So there were some positive and some negative traits that they were talking about. And T said that you need to be talkative, you need to be tiresome, you need to be more adjectives with T. And S said, yes, you need to be very sweet, you need to be sincere, you need to be sensitive. And I also put conditions and I said, you need to be interesting, you need to be more adjectives with I. Okay. So this boy was really exasperated, the boy with the blue heart, and he said, why do I have all this? So all these boys in that city, they got together and they said, this boy asked a lot of questions. He said, why do you ask so many questions? And the boy with the blue heart said, because I am the why of society. So now you can see all these boys who were playing in the park, those pulled up on their caps. If you arrange them in an order, you can form the word society. And the boy with the blue heart, he was the why of society. All right, the letter Y. So he said, asking is my nature and I will never ever stop asking. My students did this in school, and the skit that they performed was really, really appreciated by many. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. The power of punctuations. Okay, have a look at these words in the sentences in black and the sentences in. Let's eat grandpa. Again from Cannibal Town. Let's eat grandpa. Let's eat, comma, makes a difference. $25 bills. $25 bills. All right. So the hyphen makes a difference. I'm sorry, I love you. Okay, said in a tone that's not very, very promising. I'm sorry, I love you. I'm sorry, I love you. Okay, so conjunctions, these punctuations make a difference. I find inspiration in cooking my family and my dog. Okay, and now if you say it the other way, I find inspiration in cooking my family and my dog. So that commas make a difference. That's what the power of punctuations is. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We've been talking about grammatical competence. Okay, how is grammatical competence instrumental in enhancing communicative competence? So let me share with you a little anecdote here. As you can see on this slide, there is a tiny brown mouse, and he's sitting with his daddy, the daddy mouse, and the son said, "Dad, look out! There's a cat there." And as you can see in the picture, there's a cat there, and the cat says, hey, I'm going to get you for my dinner. And Papa Mouse, Daddy Mouse, an idea. He said, shh, I have an idea. Don't worry, I'll take care of this. And he turned around and he just said, woof, woof, and ran away from there, thinking that it was a dog in disguise or in the guise of this rat. So that is the significance of knowing a second language. It comes really handy at times, and it saves you from a lot of troubles. So in this case, it was the knowledge of the sound that a dog makes that made a difference to their lives. They remained alive. So grammar does this to our language learning too. So if we have good command over grammatical skills, then our communicative skills also definitely become much better. Okay. Okay. Now, talking about communicative and grammatical competence, do we need to take care of them as separate entities, or do you think that they overlap? What is your view here? Communicative competence stresses the need to know how, when, why, and why to say what to whom. We all know that this is an era of not just an era of communication, but an era of effective communication. In order to communicate effectively, we need to be aware of all the grammatical nuances so that we can make our communication much better. That reminds me of this little boy who could not see, so he was blind, and he would sit at the corner of a street. He would put out his bowl, and right next to the bowl, he had a placard which said, "Please help me, I am blind." Okay, a very straightforward sentence. Please help me, I am blind. A man came there and he asked him, why is it that I always see you sitting with such a forlorn expression? What is it that will make you happy? He said, can you see what's written? I have written the problem that I have. It's right there in front of you. Can't you see it? So the man just said, all right, I'm going to do something. I'm going to write something here and I'm going to put it here. and I'm going to come back to you the next day and see whether it has made any difference. So the man picked it up, and on the river side of the placard, he wrote something and he went away. The next day when he came back, he saw a smiling boy, and he asked him, what is it that makes you so happy now? And he said, well, I don't know, sir, but have been coming and talking to me, and they've been asking me, and I could sense a sense of empathy in them. What is it that you did that made such a lot of difference? I said, nothing, I just changed the words. Man wrote, it's a beautiful day and I cannot see it. So you see, in this, the idea of telling you the story is that sometimes we all know what to say, but how to say it, that makes a big difference. So here the story of this boy who could not see. And when the words were changed on the placard, that made a difference to his life. And he was really happy after that. So how we say really makes a difference. But how confidently can we say that we do have an effective communication skill unless we have a good command over the grammatical skills? So that is why both these skills overlap, the communicative competence and grammatical competence. We cannot really say which came first. You know, it's the same case of the chick and the egg. What came first, the chick or the egg? So that's how I look upon it as. All right. Okay, let me take you to this. This is a spiral model of language. Now, the purpose of showing you this model is I want you to see where exactly grammar is placed in this model. Now, if you observe that this model, it's a spiral, it's not a close-ended kind of a circle, it's not a circle. So a spiral model has a lot of scope for flexibility, a lot of scope for receiving, and a lot of scope for evolving and changing. It's a very dynamic circle. So this spiral model, it represents an interconnectedness of different elements and how they shape language learning in students. It is helpful in giving an idea to teachers to move from the outside in, that is from general to the specific, by engaging learners in communicative tasks, samples of genres that they intend to teach, that through wider range of samples and texts, students are able to practice grammar in a variety of contexts communicatively. Because discourse allows that kind of an interaction. As you can see, discourse is on the outermost periphery of this this spiral model, and then it's followed by genre if we move from outside in. So I think this kind of a model, if you look at it, and if you have an idea of the thinkers that we have in our classroom, some are convergent thinkers and some are divergent thinkers. So I think divergent thinkers will understand this really well, because there's a heavy reliance on genres, on discourses and texts that are provided through different resources, and then they come to from general they come to the specific. So notice that it's not an enclosed model. It is moving, evolving, a dynamic model with multiple rings. Vocabulary, spelling, pronunciation, grammar are all very familiar elements of language. However, they in themselves are not enough. Spiral puts all these elements together very open and a generative way. The choices of the outer part of the spiral, they affect the choices we need to make for the inner elements. So grammar, as you can see, stands somewhere in the middle of the spiral. So in a way, it plays the role of balancing everything. So if you look at the status of grammar here in the whole spiral, we can say that it provides balance to this whole model. It provides a sense of logicality to the language that is learned in the classroom, to the language that is taught in the classroom. It provides structure to language. So this is a kind of a skeletal framework to help support language learning. It provides meaning when that meaning is explained through through effective context, then the meanings become concrete and internalization is much better. And of course, it helps in providing an element of comprehensibility plus. Now, why I say comprehensibility plus here is that even a sentence like "Me, Tarzan, Eugene," it is comprehensible enough. You understand what the person is trying to say. "Me, Tarzan, Eugene." So, of course, we all know that grammatically it is not correct. But if we have a good hold over grammar, then from the level of comprehension, we can take our students to the level of comprehensibility plus. That is, in a way, taking them from the level of sense to the level of sensibility. So that's what the role of grammar is in this whole dynamic spiral model of language. Okay, it provides a lot of depth to language learning. So how should grammar be taught? Should it be taught explicitly or should it be taught implicitly? So the choice depends on the teachers. The choice also depends a lot on the kind of learner needs that we have in the classroom. The choice depends on the kind of approach that the teacher uses in the classroom, the kind of multiple intelligences that the teacher has in the classroom. So I want you to see the difference between these two teaching methods, explicit teaching and implicit teaching. Explicit teaching is intentional, all right? It's a structured form of teaching which is intentional. Implicit teaching, on the other hand, is accidental. You know, it's more about the students themselves going ahead and trying to discover the concepts themselves through experimenting with a lot of language inputs. So intentional in the sense that it is pre-planned, it is well structured. The teacher plans it and then presents it. And generally, you will find that in this kind of in an explicit teaching, sometimes you will not find any kind of hair bends there. It goes, it follows a certain direction, and it's very directional, and it's a very a structured form of teaching. There is a lot of focus on form here, whereas in implicit teaching, there's a lot of focus on usage. Okay, so what do you think is better for your students? Do you think when they, if you look at the conventional ways of teaching, how people taught in the olden days, through conventional methodologies, there was a lot of focus on form. They were very well versed in definitions, but when it came to actually using the language, at times there were obstacles. What kind? Explicit teaching focuses on deductive approach, and implicit focuses a lot on inductive approach to language learning. Explicit teaching is ideal for crowded classes. Why? Because it's more organized, so the teacher can take care of an organized chaos that is there in the classroom. Implicit teaching, on the other hand, is ideal for small classes because it is more time consuming and teachers can give more time to it. Explicit teaching in this through this kind of a method, there is no discovery as such by the students themselves, all right, because there's a lot of reliance on what the teacher is saying and what the teacher is teaching in the classroom. On the other hand, students teachers who use implicit way of teaching allow students to discover learning concepts by providing them concepts, the context, or the creating an ambience where they can discover the concept themselves. Explicit is less time consuming. On the other hand, implicit is more time consuming. So a reflective question here is, which approach will focus on grammatical competence and which approach will focus on communicative competence? So I request you to put your ideas in the text box there. Okay. Now let's move on to a little activity that teachers can use in the classroom. After teaching them concepts of noun, proper nouns, and common nouns. So here, as you can see there in the slide, you have all these words in a grid. You have some proper nouns, you have some common nouns, and the idea is to see how quickly you can make connections here. All right. First one is done for you. India is a country, so the red arrow connects it. How many connections do you see here, and how fast can you text those connections in the text box? Okay. All right. Okay, let's talk about the different approaches of teaching grammar. We were talking about conventional approaches of teaching grammar. There was this grammar translation method. The use of native language was very high when teachers resort to using grammar translation method. And you have the direct method. It developed as a response to grammar translation method. A lot of teaching was done in the target language here. In direct method, this approach, there was a lot of focus on BICS language. BICS language is the basic interpersonal communication skills, the kind of language that children learn when they interact with each other. So direct method gave that opportunity to students or to the teacher to allow for good interaction levels among students. The deductive and the inductive. So we'll be talking about these two in detail in later slides, in the slides to come, slides to follow. The deductive approach, teachers generally gave the rules first when teaching through using deductive approach, and rules were really, really, really very important. I came across this little quotation on rules. This is by Charles Dickens, and please have a just listen to it. This is from a book written by Charles Dickens, which said, "Now what I want is facts. Teach these boys and girls nothing but facts. Facts alone are wanted in life. Plant nothing else and root out everything else. You can only form the minds of reasoning animals upon facts. Nothing else will ever be of any service to them." So, a heavy reliance on facts. What does it lead to? It may lead to a lot of seeping in of the definitions, seeping in of the terms in the minds of the learners. But what happens when the learners try or make an attempt to use it through interactions, through their engagements with others, their peers, with the members of their family? Do you think it's helpful then? Okay, the inductive approach, on the other hand, it's the reverse of a deductive approach. Facilitates understanding of grammatical structures in the natural order of language acquisition. This approach involves students noticing patterns and working out rules themselves before they practice the language. It's a kind of a discovery learning, which is very learner-centric. For example, a teacher might ask students to notice the names of objects that's there around in the classroom. You know, that is before giving an introduction to a lesson on nouns. That is how she could. It could be a kind of a lead-in exercise where she asks the students to have a look and notice what all things are there and name those things. So the students will have an idea of what naming words are. So the teacher gradually leads in the students through this activity. And of course, communicative approach, which is the central theme of today's session. Communicative approach to teaching grammar, it not only is the knowledge of form important, but also how to use that form in meaningful context through collaboration. So the word collaboration is really important here. And it is this approach that allows the teachers to give autonomy to their students, and the term autonomous collaborative learning, that's really significant here, because the students get that autonomy and they kind of take in the responsibility of their learning on their shoulders when they are engaged in collaborative kind of activities with their peers. Okay, so okay, we've already talked about the different approaches. So I'll move yeah. Now, the focus on communicative approach here. This is a mingling activity that is very, very productive, and I've been using it so very often. A mingling activity that allows language learning through real communication. Okay, so what the teacher does is, the teacher writes down some questions on the blackboard, and asks the students to mingle in the classroom. All right. So there's a high five question. You know how to gesture the high, you know how to do a high five. There's a high five question. There's a mid five question. There's a low five question. And there's a turkey five question, which is like this, the shape of a turkey. Okay, so the high five question could be, this is just a sample that I've given you here. Where did you go last summer? So the teacher can ask the students to move around, and when the teacher says stop, the students have to stop, do a high five, and then ask this question. All right, they exchange information, and then they move around, they move about again, mingle with at least, let's say, 2-3 people more. So that way there's enough practice of the questioning technique, how to use question, how to use interrogatives in the sentences that have a question mark in the end. Then the mid five, who did you go out with? All right, so they can talk about it, they mingle, and when the teacher says stop, they do a mid five and they ask each other this question. So they share info, they share their experiences. Why did you choose that place? It's a low five question, so the gesture becomes different. And the turkey five question, what did you do there? Okay, so this is a fun activity that can be done in the classroom, and students love to do it. And it's a great way of making them practice question words. Okay, so now that teaching has gone online, I have a question for you. It's a little activity. It's my thumbs up question for you. As you can see, there's a picture here where you can see 3 people in the picture. There are some hidden words in the picture. So what you have to do is find out those hidden words. Give me a single thumbs up for 1 word, a double thumbs up for 2 words if you're able to find 2 words, and 3 thumbs up. All right, 3 thumbs up if you can find all those 3 words, and 4 thumbs up if you can construct a sentence using these 3 words. Can I have your responses in the chat box? So this is what you can use in your when you're teaching your students online. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next slide. Right, I'm not able to have a look at the chats or the texted messages in the chat right now, but I hope this can be taken care of. Just a sec. Okay, coming back to the different kind of methodologies. What's happening here? Sometimes technology can be quite intimidating. Okay, the PPP method, many of you must be aware of this method. The PPP method of teaching grammar in the classroom. Okay. So as you can see, the first P stands for presentation, the second P stands for practice, and the third P stands for production. It's a very well-structured method of teaching. In this PPP method, as you can see, the very first stage is the stage of presentation, where if a teacher is trying to teach a concept, has a lesson plan where she intends to teach a concept of grammar, she has to begin with the presentation stage. Okay, so after maybe an energizer or a warm-up, the teacher can give a presentation of what she intends to teach to her students. So here the talk time, the teacher talk time is almost 75%, while the student talk time at the presentation stage is merely 25%. So it's a very teacher-centric stage where she is doing the presentation of the concept that she intends to teach. Then once the presentation has been done, the next stage that comes up is the practice stage, the stage of practice, where the teacher can group students, or maybe ask them to sit in groups, or maybe engage them in pair work. And the talk time reduces to 40% because now the students have to be engaged in a kind of controlled practice session. So she introduces activities where the students get together in pairs, or even interpersonally also this could be done. It's not necessary that they have to be grouped or paired. So a semi-controlled activities for practice where student talk time. If it's always good when we're talking about collaborative learning and all, it's good to put them all together, maybe in pairs, or make them sit in groups where they can share ideas, and then they learn a lot by these kind of engagements. So the talk time is almost 60% here, the student talk time, and a lot of practice is on. Then comes the level, or the stage of production, which is where the teacher tries to make assessment of what the students have learned. So here the teacher's role is that of a facilitator or a monitor or just an observer. And here the focus is, there's a lot of focus on fluency rather than accuracy. So the students now, their engagement is almost 90% here, and they use the language in a natural everyday kind of a context. So that this is here through this method, the students can also be made to practice a lot of big terminology, big the kind of everyday language or the routine language that children use to communicate with each other. Here's an example that you can use in the classroom. Think of a grammar concept. So in this case, I have taken up the usage of can, how students can be made to practice the usage of the word can. What can you do? So as a warm-up, there is a beautiful chant that I have all used in my classroom, and I learned this chant from a very dear friend. So it's like this. It goes like this. I can't do it. I can't do it. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. I can't do it. Yes, you can. I can't do it. Yes, you can. I can't do it. Yes, you can. You can do it. I can do it. So now here you can see in this chant, there are two kinds of sentences. One is a negative one and the other is a positive one. One chunk, what can be done is that the teacher can divide the class into two parts or a group into two, where one, half of the group can read out the chunk that has the word can't in it, and the other half can read out the chunk that has the word can in it. Okay, so it goes really very rhythmically, and students love to do it. I can't do it. Yes, you can. You can do it. I can do it. And it also, this chant also provides a lot of motivation to the students. So this is a kind of a warm-up that can be used to give a kind of a lead-in to what the teacher is expecting them to do in the classroom. Now coming to the presentation stage, the teacher can talk about what he or she can do, all right? Or she may write that down on the blackboard, what the teacher can do. I can sing, I can drive a car, I can paint a picture, all right? So, or she could elicit ideas from the students and write them down on the blackboard. Now, in the practice stage, she can ask them to sit she can ask them to do pair works and show them pictures of some activities, and then she can ask the students to pick up and say what they can do. So the students can sit in group and they can pick up pictures and say, yes, I can do this, I can ride a horse, I can ride a bike, all right, or I can't cook. So the usage of can and can't can be practiced in this way. And coming to the stage of production, the students can be asked to write sentences about what they can do in their free time. All right. So this is what the PPP method is about. There are so many more ways of using this method, and it's a very structured method. Teachers can really go wrong with this method if they use it in the classroom. The strengths and weaknesses of this method, it's very good for new teachers because it follows a certain pattern, and it's a very structured system. So if the teachers are aware of it, they cannot, it's really good for them. Teachers trained on this find it easier to use new methods and approaches than those who do not. So it's a good idea to train the teachers in this method, and that becomes their strength. Weaknesses of this method, it encourages accuracy over fluency because there's so much of focus on structure. It does not allow for recapitulation. I think, as I talked about it earlier too in one of the approaches, that it's a very directional kind of approach, and this PPP method also follows a very specific direction, so there's no kind of a U-turn there. Too much teacher talk time. When there is a lot of teacher talk time, then what happens? The attention of the students can be distracted. So especially at the time of the presentation stage, okay, when it's a presentation stage, the teacher talk time can prove to be slightly demotivating or detrimental to the understanding of the students. Students can put into practice what they learn. They can use their own ideas as well. These are some of the opportunities here. Teachers can break the complex language into meaningful, manageable chunks for students to understand. So instead of giving them huge chunks to do, they could practice in small chunks. Like I did the chant with you. So it was broken up into 2 chunks. One chunk for the students who said they couldn't do it, and one for the students who said that they could do something. Threats to this: students can get lost or confused during the grammar explanation, and students can easily get bored or distracted while the teacher is in the presentation stage. Okay, now coming to a sample of, this is an idea that you can use in the classroom using visuals to make students practice grammar. Now, if you look at this, what do you think the grammar focus of these visuals is? Okay, I would love to have your answers in the chat box. Okay, what do you think is the grammar focus of these videos? You can see there's this boy here, and he has ideas coming in his mind. He's thinking about something. There's an aeroplane in his thoughts. So what exactly is he thinking about? Is he thinking about a vacation? Is he thinking about, how going to spend his time? Is it going to be to a big city, or to a jungle, or to a desert, or to, a sea beach or a mountain? So you can use visuals to elicit lots of ideas in the classroom and to teach your grammar concepts. There could be a number of possibilities here to practice the tense form going to. I am going to have a holiday. To practice action words. So there were a number of actions, as you could see in the picture. So you could elicit these words from the students, ask them, you could do a brainstorming session, or you could also just scaffold and get the ideas and write them down on the blackboard. Verbs followed by 2 infinitives. I hope to go to New York. Or comparisons. I prefer to have a beach holiday, but my wife wants to go skiing. Or to teach past form, future form of verbs. Last year I went to Honolulu. Next year we will go to Singapore. Okay, so if you have any other idea, you can text the ideas to me, and whenever I get a chance to read the chats, I would definitely love to respond to. Let's play with visuals. All right, teaching position words through puppets or visuals. So I want you to meet this owl. This is Kolu the owl. Kolu the owl has a scowl as he lost an ear, and he cannot hear. Where could it be? He must go and see. Around the town, he went with a frown, looking for his ear. Help him, oh dear. Okay, so beginning a lesson, you could use this as a lead-in kind of an activity where you can introduce this out to your students. And now let's see, the worksheet that I would want to share with you here is, as you can see on this slide, there are different places, different rooms of a house, right? So the very first square that you see, that looks like a living room, because there's a sofa, there's a television, there's a chair and a carpet, and there are question marks there. The second square that you can see looks like a bedroom, all right? And the third one is a kitchen, and the fourth one is probably a garden. So the question marks here, where is the owl's ear? And the question marks can be used to frame to frame questions here. Is it behind? Is it between the paintings? No, but we don't see it anywhere there. Is it on the television? No, we cannot see the owl's ear on the television. Is it under the table? No, it's not. Is it under the lamp? No, it isn't. So where is Kolu's ear? So now move on to the bedroom, and the same questions can be asked here. Is it under the chair, over the bed, behind the curtains? So now you must have got an idea of what the the grammar focus of this lesson plan could be. It could be questioning techniques. It could also be prepositions, right? Position words. In the kitchen, on the counter, on the table, next to the, beside the sink, and then move on to the garden. All right, and finally, where is that ear discovered? Chomp, chomp, as you can see, somebody is having a nice meal. So there it is in his stomach. So Kolu's ear has been eaten up by this nasty rat. And now I would like to share with you a preposition chant that is related to this lesson, the lesson plan. It's called mice, mice everywhere, on the table and under the chair. One jumped over my hair. Mice, mice at 2:30, sitting in my shoe. Mice, mice inside the room, sleeping on a broom. Mice, mice along my bamboo garden wall. Mice, mice, oh, why don't you go to Timbuktu? All right, so this preposition chant can also be a part of the lesson plan. So it's a very good way of teaching prepositions, and also, as I said, times technical terms can be quite intimidating. So it's a good idea to make the students aware of what position words are, instead of, straight away introducing the definition of a preposition, that is what preposition is, and trying to define it before your student. It's a good idea to first, allow them, give them a kind of a lead in, let them be familiar with position words, and then later on you can tell them the technical definition of what prepositions are, what a preposition is. So that's how we take them from form to meaning through contexts like these. So providing context, contextualizing any kind of a form with context that the students can relate to. That's also very important. If you provide context that they cannot relate to, the understanding would not be very strong. So you need to give them kind of situations, or create those situations that can be relatable, that they are aware of and they can relate to. So that way you can take them from the level of form to the level of meaning, and that's really very helpful. Some of the techniques or the tools for teaching grammar: you can teach grammar through texts, you can teach through realia, role plays, visuals. Modeling is a very good way of teaching. So even in the presentation stage, if the teachers can do a kind of a modeling for the students, and the understanding would be much stronger. Diagrams, games, and music. Now here, this question, does one size shoe fit all? I mean, it's a very relevant question here, because what happens is, when a teacher enters the classroom, 40 eyes look up, they look up at her. So entering the classroom with so many people looking up to her, and then if the teacher thinks of this question, I mean, if you question metaphorically, does one size shoe fit all? And if you think of the kind of instructional strategies that teachers use in the classroom, if there's no variety in the instructions, then it would not be good for the students, because in a class you come across at least 8 to 9 multiple intelligences. Multiple intelligences, they were discovered by Howard Gardner, and he said that there are at least 8 to 9 multiple intelligences in the room. So one single kind of teaching strategy is never ever going to help the students. So you need to have a lot of variety in giving instructions to the students in the classroom. So that is why these tools really help. Here you can see two worksheets here, worksheet A and worksheet B. So there is a lot of missing information on these worksheets. So whatever information is missing in worksheet A is there in worksheet B. All right, so students can be, it's called lend a hand. Students can be asked to do this activity. So before you introduce this activity, you need to provide the context for this activity. So you need to take worksheets out for worksheet A and B, and half the class gets worksheets A and the other half gets B. Then you set the context for the task. As you can see in the slide here, you can see there are pictures of some people. They are probably volunteers. What you need to tell the students here is you are organizers of a summer camp for homeless children. You have a list of volunteers here. Your task is to decide what you're going to do and what the volunteers are each going to do. Individually, the students are going to read the list of chores and then write their names next to the 2 chores that they want to do. And then you pair them, A and B. They should ask what their partners want to do. All right. And then you can also write that down on the blackboard. What do you want to do? So that the students, if at all they need any kind of prompting, the words are there on the blackboard. What do you want to do? And then I want to dash dash dash. Students should question each other to fill in the gaps on their sheets. An example of a language output. A asks, how old is Sharon? As you can see in the picture there. And B will reply, she's 28. What does she do? She's a reporter. Where does she work? She works at or she works for NTV. That's how students can share info in their gaps here. Okay, so I have already discussed this with you. You need to set the context and then give them the task and pair them. This is a very interesting activity, and I have often done it with my students, and it gives a very deep insight into grammar learning here. And now I want you to have a look at this. It's making sense out of senselessness using nonsense passages in the classroom. Now, if you look at the passage here, if I read it out, will it make sense? The Snolls, that's the title. The grifty Snolls cloppered rossingly along the untubed trake. They were clary, so they higgled on spiritely. Archivar carve, they squawked hopefully. Mapsar quaj. Quaj snarled one and flitted even jucklier. If you look at this nonsense passage, it does not make sense because there are so many words in this passage here that you will not find anywhere in the dictionary. But there are some cues. For instance, there might be an S added to make something, to make a plural. There might be there's an article there. Okay, there's an ed added to a word, which will give you an idea that probably that word could be a verb. So what I ask my students to do is to read this, and then once they read this and if they have a good understanding of what the 9 parts of speech is, they will be able to answer questions there, no matter how nonsense they may sound. But the next part is important. The next part is that you ask the students to replace all the nonsense words with words that make sense. So it's a very good way of engaging the students into a very into an activity that will really activate their critical thinking skills. They'll use all their analytical skills to come up with words that make sense. So the grifty Snolls, now they assume that grifty is probably an adjective and Snolls is a noun, so they can replace these 2 words with something else. The grifty Snolls, the giant snail. Okay, so that's how this activity can be done in the classroom, and it gives a good practice of grammatical terms. Another activity here is that it's a game that it's a skunk game. Hey, Mr. Skunk, may we meet your son? Oh, let's have some fun. All right. So there's a student chunk here, as you can see, and there's a teacher chunk here. Students can stand in a line. There can be a starting line. The teacher can play the role of a skunk, and the students need to go to the finishing line by doing the gestures that the skunk tells them to do. Now, gestures here means practicing moves. All right. So when the students say, hey, Mr. Skunk, may we meet your son? Oh, let us have some fun. So the teacher chunk says, yes, you may. And the students say, how? Can you jump like a frog? And the student have to answer, yes, I can jump like a frog. And then they jump and try to cross that area, and the skunk will have to try to catch them. Can this game be played online? Yes, it can be played online. The teacher can provide a list of action words which the students can write down, and they should place the cards face down. So here is on the next slide, it's much clearer. Students can write 5 action words on 5 cards and place them face down. The teacher shows a picture to them. Students pick up a card and frame a sentence using the verb written on that card. Shuffle the cards and then they play on. If it's played in a virtual classroom setup, the students could answers could be texted in the chat box or written for a feedback later. For example, Mr. Single sings a song. Okay, the student picks up the square which has the word sing and he frames a sentence. So a lot of games that we actually play in the classroom can be played in the online too. All right. For instance, you have noun games. You can start a noun relay. The teacher says a word giant and the students have to pick up the word. And then they have to give an example of a noun beginning with the last letter of the word that the teacher had uttered. And it could go on like that. You know, it could be played in the chat box. Okay, then the guess games there, show them a picture. All right, ask them, guess 3 things about this family and see how, what kind of sentence construction they indulge in. Okay, I know we're running out of time, so I am going to be quick with the slides here. Okay, teaching grammar online requires class management. All right, so if it's a big class, the teachers, I'm moving on to the next module of this session here. The teachers can divide the class into smaller groups and grouping can be done. Let it be a heterogeneous group so that students also learn from each other. And time management, of course, is very important because it takes time to, the teacher must prepare all the tasks beforehand so that there's no wastage of time there. And preparing materials to supplement the textual content. There's this book by Cambridge University Press called Grammar Gear, which is very, very helpful. It has a lot of ideas which teachers can use. You can customize those ideas, you can adapt those ideas, and you can use them in the classrooms too. So Grammar Gear and lots of lesson plans in that book that can be used by the teachers. So it can be used to supplement the, okay. So when you are stepping into a digital world, okay, it's very challenging, but do not feel, do not think that it cannot be done. It's not impossible. Excellent opportunity to develop new skills. So teaching online is a new experience for me too, and but it's something that that we all can learn and we can polish our skills as we go deeper into it. Do not reinvent the wheel. A lot of resources are already available, yes, but you can use your creativity to come up with lesson plans. But there are resources that are available online. There are resources, as I said, you can use the Grammar Gear book to adapt the lesson plans from there. Go global. Identify learner needs. You do not have to be global all the time. All right, you need to understand what your language learners need, and accordingly, if there's something that they can relate to, that kind of a context would be much better. So you need to take care of their multiple intelligences. Focus on quality and not quantity. Connect with teachers of tomorrow. I'm sure Cambridge University Press must have introduced this to you early. Teach synchronously and asynchronously. Okay, there are 2 ways of doing it right now. You know, we are face to face, so it's but when you can record your videos, you can record your lesson plans, you can use WhatsApp, you can use YouTube, and then later on share it with your students, so that way also you can teach online. Create an online constitution of rules. That's very important, and please keep the parents involved here because they must know what it takes and how the students are going through this phase of their lives. Okay, a recap of what we did today, as you can see on your slides. Providing a context, I talked about this. So we are now concluding the session. The flow of grammar, writing. Grammar rules intimidating if they are taught through interactive methods, and students should be allowed to discover the rules. All right, be like for our poly parents. Okay, so we need to do away with the Grammonster. So that's, thank you much. And hello, Monica.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Monica, you can
Yeah,
take
can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
I just got the message that the webcam is off. Okay.
No worries, ma'am. So
Can you
we
hear me
move
now?
on to our question and answer sessions. And ma'am, I would read out the questions and so that you can answer them.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm just pulling out the questions. Meanwhile, I will request everyone to
Hello.
Monica, do you want me to take it? Ma'am, am I audible?
Yeah, your voice is breaking. Yeah, I can hear you, Ankesh. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am. There's
Yes,
one
Ankesh?
question. What is the target age for small activities? Small activities, if I am not mistaken. Small activities.
Is there any specific activity? Any
No,
target?
Yes,
no,
ma'am.
there
It's
is
the name of activity,
Activity
small
or
activity.
small activities.
oh,
SNOW.
oh,
Small activities.
the snows. That okay. It's about the nonsense passage, right? See, it
Yes.
depends. If you the activity that I showed you, that was titled as Snows, is meant for students of you can say high school level, because you know students need to have a good understanding of all the 9 parts of speech. But it can also be customized. It can be made much simpler, and it can be adapted and used for students at the let's say class 4 or 5 students too. But it depends on how you're customizing it. All right, using simpler words. There are a lot of nonsense passages, or if teachers intend to make their own passages through materials development, they can do so by using simpler language, less intimidating words. If and they can, the activity can be customized for all age levels. Not for the primary age level, but yes, when language, the grammar concepts are taught to students from class 5 onwards, let's say that after the primary level, that this activity can really be introduced, and it's very effective for all the students there.
Okay, ma'am. The next question
Yes,
is,
Sankesh.
how do we encourage kids for writing skills? How to develop interest in writing?
Okay, you need to introduce, we were talking about the spiral model where I talked about the genre approach, and I talked about, a lot of focus on discourses. So the students, if you want to work on their writing skills, must be introduced to a lot of samples of writing. Writing must be there all around us. Different kind of samples may be given to them too. So when they read well, they'll be able to write well. Okay, and then giving inputs to them, writing inputs to them, making them very interesting and appealing, so that they are encouraged to write. So that would be good for them. So maybe we could have a session on writing skills someday. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. So
Yes, ma'am.
now
Hello.
this is an interesting question from Pushpa, ma'am. So sorry, Harjeet Kaur. Why do English pronunciation keeps changing? Why there is always
Why
a
do
change in English? Why do the English pronunciation keeps changing?
why does the English pronunciation keeps changing? See, a
Yes.
lot depends on the local context too. I mean, is it the pronunciation that keeps changing, or do people keep changing pronunciation? There are two ways of looking at this question. So a lot depends on the local context. A lot depends on where you are from, how you are speaking a particular word. So English language has a lot of flexibility. But yes, there are correct ways of pronouncing words, and that requires a lot of practice. So it's not that there's a lot of yes, language evolves over time, a lot of things change over time, but pronunciation is really impacted by local context too. The place, the city where we live in, the kind of language, or even the L1 at times have a great it has a great influence on our pronunciation, the influence of the first language. So that's there. So that's what impacts the pronunciation, Harjeet. Yes.
The next question is, how to teach grammar to kindergarten students?
there are so many amazing, interesting ways to teach grammar to kindergarten students. See, kindergarten students, you don't need to teach definitions to them, and there's so many activities that you can engage them in. For example, if you are teaching nouns, you can just ask the students to get things that they can in the school playground, and they can get those things to you, and then you ask them what are they called. That's how you introduce the concept of nouns to them. And all these parts of speech can be taught to kindergarten students through a playway method. Not just parts of speech, like if you are teaching them vocabulary, involve parents also into this. You can ask the parents, like if they prepare the lunch boxes for their children, you can ask them to prepare a square paratha on Tuesday or a triangular paratha on Wednesday, and that's how they learn the names of these shapes. So there are so many myriad ways of teaching grammar to kindergarten students, but the focus, it has to be done in a very subtle and a very fun kind of a manner.
Okay.
I
So
hope
the
that
next
answers your
question is,
question.
There is another question which says they want to understand the abbreviation. It's EFL. What exactly it is?
English as a foreign language. EFL stands for English as a foreign language. So I think we were talking about, the delayed impact of grammar that is there on students at times. So I was specifically talking about foreign language learners. You go to a country and you learn a foreign language. English may be a foreign language for so many people in this world. So how do they learn? So EFL stands for English as a foreign language.
All right, ma'am.
Okay.
So there was a query regarding how to engage the students effectively online. I mean, in these online
How to
classes,
engage students
effectively in these
effectively
online
online.
classes. Yeah. Any tips?
Okay, yes, I think we talked about it, but the thing is that you need to prepare a blueprint of the whole plan, and everything has to be very well organized. So pre-planning is very important before you execute it. You need to first, prepare a plan. What exactly is it that you want to teach your students? Because right now, I think everybody is engaged in teaching online. So we need to go online with a lot of preparedness, and without preparing, I it can be a disaster. So prepare a blueprint, and make your students a part of a group. Maybe you can group them into smaller groups. If it's a big classroom, you can have small groups there, and then have days allocated for the different groups. And whatever you are teaching online, see, like for instance, I'll give you my experience today. I was not able to see, or I was not able to read your chats. So it's a kind of a very, it was quite a one-way kind of a thing, because I wasn't able to read your responses. But if you are taking classes on Zoom, for instance, where you can see the students' faces and grades, you will actually know what kind of responses the students might give you. So make your lesson plans engaging. Use visuals. They are very, very effective. Uh, Focus on your speaking skills, all right, because the way you address your students, the way you talk to them, use a lot of narratives. They are always so very helpful.
And next query is explicit approach good to learn grammar?
Of course, why not? See, it's the idea was not to tell you that any approach is good or bad. The idea was to differentiate between explicit and implicit approach. Explicit approach, of course, focuses on a lot of rules, and the discovery is not the kind of a discovery that we intend the students to have. That sense of discovery, it lacks that. But it's not that it's not helpful. So it depends on the kind of learners that you have. It depends on what exactly you are teaching them. So doing a need analysis is very, very important. So any approach is not good or bad. It depends on how you're using it. Okay, the focus of today's session was on communicative way of teaching grammar. So my focus was more on teaching through implicit methodologies. Okay,
All
I
right.
hope it answers the question.